Welcome back to 110 Daily on the 110 Sports Network. Josh Doring is here with me. Josh, if I gave you if you had one more football game to watch, college football game to watch in your life, it had to come from this season and it had to have already been played. Are you picking Notre Dame Clemson or BYU Coastal Carolina?
I'm probably picking BYU Coastal because we're going to get a rematch of Clemson Notre Dame. And during that game, I was just sitting there going, I feel like this would be different if Trevor Lawrence was playing.
Right.
It was hard to completely enjoy that game because there was this massive caveat that it was hard for me to really put any stock into that win other than Notre Dame is a very good team.
Mm-hmm.
That I'm still not convinced they're a national championship caliber team like the other three teams that are probably going to be in the playoff. But they've absolutely earned their shot to prove that they are.
It's
They
just
need to do it against Trevor Lawrence though. So
or
the
Justin Fields or Matt Jones or I mean when you have Ian Book, no offense to Ian Book, but he's just not. This is a complete ricochet shot at Ian Book, but clearly there's a level in between. Well, there's a level in between Trevor Lawrence and Justin Fields, a small one, but then there's a level between Justin Fields and the rest of them. But right in that game, it's okay. There's this five-star freshman who's only started one game, and yet you still needed overtime and a score right at the end to actually end up winning the football game, right? Because Clemson scored and was up in that football game in regulation, and Ian Book, to his credit, brought them back and scored, and they ended up winning in overtime. But right, you feel like as Trevor Lawrence has proven since he came back, just reminding people just how good he is and how much better that Clemson team is when he's on the football field, even if DJ was admirable in the two games that he started.
and you contrast that with BYU Coastal Carolina, where in many ways this is their national championship. Coastal still has a conference to go and win,
Mm-hmm.
but this is the game to prove that you're legit to get BYU into that same conversation as Cincinnati, for Coastal to prove that they are as good as these other undefeated non-power five teams,
Mm-hmm.
because there was clearly this pecking order heading into this game of Cincinnati followed by BYU followed by Coastal, primarily because of the division the conference Coastal Carolina plays in.
Right.
There was a That part of it made it even more fun, whereas the consequences of that Clemson Notre Dame game decreased the significance for me because you knew there was every opportunity to get a rematch, and we haven't seen Trevor Lawrence play that Notre Dame team. So I would give the edge to this game we saw this weekend.
It was, and it wasn't supposed to happen. That's
Mhm.
the, that. That's the. I think that adds to this. That adds to, at the very least, the narrative of this football game. That 3 days before it happened, athletic directors had to get on the phone because it was Coastal, right? That had their game postponed due to COVID-19. Get on the horn, make it happen, and that adds to the narrative. I picked BYU to win this game on Friday because I didn't think that 3 days to prepare for Zach Wilson was enough to, and just the BYU offense to prepare. I didn't think that was enough time to prepare. I just didn't. They hold them to 17 points. I have a question for you. How many times this season has BYU scored less than 41 points?
I'll say once.
It's now twice. They have won. They beat UTSA 27-20 in the second week of the season. But this is a team that consistently, more than consistently, scores 41 points wherever they go. They scored 66 the week prior to this one, and only giving up 17 to this team is beyond impressive. And one of the, like, I don't think it's a ridiculous thing to say that in terms of, considering the stage and considering the importance of the game, this is one of the better defensive performances in college football this season, because even like that Notre Dame Clemson game, there wasn't a ton of defense played. The final score was 45-38 or something like that. And all of the other Power 5 teams that are supposed to be good, that have high-powered offenses, they just blow people out, and there haven't been very many top-tier Power 5 football games this season that actually ended up being competitive. The only one being, of course, that Notre Dame game. This was a really high level of football that was being played here. It wasn't just two mid-major teams that happened to be pretty close. That happened to both be top 25 teams because of the circumstances, and just happened to be relatively close in terms of their talent for mid-majors. These are just two good football teams, and Coastal in particular turning in a performance that they needed, because like you said, this is essentially their national championship. If they go on to win their conference, they'll get a good bowl game, and of course, as likely the highest ranked non-power. No, they'll be the second highest ranked, right? Assuming Cincinnati doesn't lose. But right, that was one of my biggest things with this one, is that this was just a really good football game. This wasn't a really good mid-major football game.
And yeah, you got to give credit to Coastal's, I guess, the non-skill position players, offensive line, defense. It's not just one or two guys that make this team go.
Mm-hmm.
That was a really impressive collective performance to keep themselves in that game and be in control of it for large portions, specifically with what BYU's been able to do on offense this season. And the other thing, just from a bigger picture of this game, we're talking about 2 inches between these teams, right?
Mm-hmm.
When he caught that ball, I thought he was going to score. Another credit to Coastal's unheralded players, that was an impressive stop. Because when you get that momentum going forward, I thought, oh, there's no way they're going to be able to stop him.
Right.
And he lost his momentum immediately. But that's what we're talking about between these two teams. They're clearly, and you also throw in the travel for BYU, not to take anything away from this win, but they're clearly on the same level. They're both very, very good. So you've got both of them plus Cincinnati.
Mm-hmm.
Cincinnati gets Tulsa twice. They get to play them in the rescheduled game and then the conference championship game. Coastal gets Louisiana Lafayette a second time in their championship game, and BYU is on that level too.
Mm-hmm.
This is the first time in the playoff era, and that I can really remember, that we have this many quote-unquote mid-major teams that are this good.
Mm-hmm.
The only team outside the Power 5, and I'm including Notre Dame in that because of their affiliation with the ACC, to finish in the top 10 of the college football playoff rankings was UCF the second time around in 2018. The first time they finished 12th.
Mm-hmm.
They didn't even get into the top 10 at the end of the season despite being undefeated and playing in the AAC.
Mm-hmm.
And part of that was not enough quality wins. These teams have, if they can, specifically these teams being Cincinnati and Coastal Carolina, if they can finish this off and get 2 wins over the second best team in their conference, plus you throw in this BYU win for Coastal Carolina, some of the other quality wins that Cincinnati has in the AAC, we have never seen the depth and quality that we've got this season, assuming they can close this thing out and win the rest of their games.
Mm-hmm.
Because they're both going to finish, if they go undefeated, I have to think they're both going to finish in the top 10.
Have we not had the depth of talent in the mid majors before? Or have we not had the recognition of it before? Off the top of my head, I can't think of a team of a season in which this is the case, because you also have these, right? But Louisiana at 9-1 wouldn't be 17th in the country in any season other than this one. Tulsa at 6-1 wouldn't be 18th in the country in any season other than this one. Coastal wouldn't be 11th in any season other than this one. They'd be in the top 25, I think, at this point. 100%. But like you just said, UCF finished 12th, And this is Coastal Carolina, a team that, and whether it's fair or not, Coastal Carolina doesn't do this very often, and that matters because that matters in terms of the AP voters actually taking you seriously. Liberty wouldn't be 9-1 and sitting at 22nd. Buffalo wouldn't be 4-0 and sitting at 24th. I think right. I think Cincinnati and Coastal are high up there in terms of, and BYU in terms of the quality of team coming out of a mid-major, and the fact that they're all in the top 14 in the country is certainly significant. I would just be, and this is more a pondering than a challenge, that when has there been a season where we were closer to this than we thought we were? Teams just weren't getting the recognition that they deserved.
Fair question. And I should clarify, when I was talking about the rankings for UCF, I was using the playoff rankings. Those are just the ones that I go by. That wasn't to correct you on anything. But
we don't have those yet, Josh. At least for this week.
Right. Just so everybody understands in terms of the committee's perception of UCF.
Right.
They did get to 8th in 2018. That was the only other top 10 finish. It's a fair question. I'm in depth. I was specifically thinking about the ability to put together 3-4 quality wins. That they get these rematches in the title games. Coastal gets to add BYU. That part of it, I think, is what separates this to a certain extent. But it's also fair that maybe this season starts changing the perception of non-Power 5 teams, because you needed to be in the AAC to get within striking distance of the top 10 before this season.
Sure.
UCF could get there going undefeated in the AAC, and then you get a top 25 win over Memphis, and you get another top 25 win in there somewhere, and all of a sudden you can finish 8th. But we haven't really had, and I guess the way I'll summarize this is, right, this was the latest meeting between undefeated non-Power 5 teams, I believe, ever. That to me is what makes this a little bit different, but it's incredibly fair to wonder, have we had a similar situation and just not been paying attention to it as much because of the realities of this season and the way things have gone?
Are you ready for my idea?
I'm always ready for ideas.
Second to last weekend of the season. All mid-majors have a built-in bye week. A built-in bye week that you can use as a bye week if you'd like to, or a built-in bye week that teams like Coastal and BYU are the two best mid-major teams. Right, because UCF could be planning to have Memphis as one of their top 25 wins in a season that they're trying to go and really contend for a college football playoff. But what if Memphis ends up sucking and they're a 7-4 team, right? Or you get to that second to last weekend of the season and Memphis is, 6-2 instead of 8-0 like you thought they might be, or you get my point. So that you can schedule, right, because clearly this is doable. If it wasn't doable, then they wouldn't have played this game. In COVID-19 times, BYU and Coastal Carolina were able to make this game happen in 96 hours, essentially. And that included a 2,200-mile plane ride for one of the teams, right? It typically isn't going to be this hard. So you build in a bye week, and pretty, it becomes pretty obvious before that bye week, right, who the best power. But most years you have multiple mid-major schools late into the season that are ranked, right? At least there are some undefeated teams in there. There are some really good teams that you build in this bye week so that the best mid-majors, if they want to, can play each other, because whoever won, this was beneficial for both schools. Of course, Coastal ends up winning, and so BYU, any chance that BYU thought it might still have of getting into the college football playoff is gone now, right? But this was a win to get it on the schedule for both teams. So why do we have to have COVID-19 for this to be a thing? Just build a bye weekend so that, of course, the conferences, but this would almost always be something that a mid-major would be interested in exploring, right? Because they need another quality win and need a chance to prove that they're the best mid-major football team in the sport. Now, you might get to a point where, a team is 7th and undefeated and they don't really think they have a chance to get to the college football playoff. But what they do know is that they want to play in a New Year's Six bowl, and so they just say no. I mean, I guess that could happen, but I feel like this is something that would be cool to see at the end of every season, is that you end up having these mid-major heavyweights each season going toe-to-toe to really add to their resume.
I like it.
Thank you.
Right, just give the option.
Yeah.
Let an AAC team schedule, even if it's not an undefeated Sun Belt or Conference USA team or whatever it might be. You look at, so Marshall lost this week, but that's still clearly a good football team. They were undefeated heading into this week. You schedule that game. That helps your resume. All for it.
Right.
Are you ready for my idea?
Quickly.
That came courtesy of Nicole Auerbach, but I wholeheartedly agree. If Michigan can't play this game on Saturday because of COVID.
Oh, I saw this.
Yes.
Yeah.
No brainer. Instead of changing your rules.
Explain real quick though what she said.
So Nicole Auerbach essentially said, if Michigan can't play this game, instead of having the Big Ten change their rules to allow Ohio State into the Big Ten title game, just switch the schedule around to give Ohio State an opponent so that they have an opportunity to earn their way in and get another win on their resume. Or if they lose, obviously, then it's a different discussion. But assuming they take care of business, let them have an opportunity to play. If Michigan can't go, just reschedule. We've been rescheduling all season. It's not a big deal. I am all for this. Give them some Big Ten team. She proposed a specific solution that I believe was them playing Maryland. You can figure it out. Let them play if they are eligible to play.
Yep. 100%. It's right. We're so busy. Like, flexibility wasn't built into the college football schedule as much as it should have been, but there are still places to be flexible like this. And really it's conferences and football teams is shooting themselves in the foot for not taking advantage of that. I mean, we just talked about how Coastal and BYU used the flexibility that they had to put together this football game. The Big Ten probably has the resources to do it 10 times what the Coastal and BYU have, just because of the nature of being in the Big Ten. Yeah, make it happen. If it can happen, make it happen. And while there's not a ton of flexibility, use it to your advantage. Coming up next, we'll do Humor Me Please to round out the hour. Winners and losers at the top of the next. We'll do all of it next. You're watching 110 Daily on the 110 Sports Network.